It's like watching the Avengers movies, huh?
Yeah, just like watching the Avengers movies.
What's up, Cole?
Hey, what's going on?
Hey,
This computer set up right.
so you getting fancy dressed up now? You got collars and everything?
Chains.
Hey,
Hey,
man,
man.
I only
Hey,
got
man.
like 3 t-shirts, man. I think I wore them all already.
Hey, he feels safe to wear that chain that a Debo ain't around.
You still ugly, Malachi.
What do you think?
There's some things you can't fix.
Nah, man.
I was over y'all boy house yesterday.
Who?
Savvy, your Booker T.
Oh, no.
boy.
Yeah. Jamel, yeah.
Yeah.
He's still dating Martha?
Yeah, they engaged.
Okay.
Okay.
That'll work.
Him and Eric were over there.
Yeah.
E.
They got a nice little podcast, so Eric does. Yeah.
Yeah, he got a good little history one.
Yeah.
What's going on?
It's nice.
Actually, Chronicle did a little piece on it.
I'll be right back. Hello.
It's a history podcast?
Yeah.
Okay.
They call
I
it
saw that post.
Yeah, Gentleman's History.
What kind of podcasts do you guys listen to? Like, just out of curiosity.
I listen to a lot of All Def Digital. Kev on Stage, Patrick Cloud, To Hear More, Tony Baker. Of course, I listen to Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I was on him for a while. Honestly, it's just that I kind of fell off on podcasts in general. Because I listen to a lot of news. When I'm in the car, I listen to a lot of news.
Wait, news podcasts or just news?
Like NPR.
Okay, yeah, I've listened to them. I feel like I'm late to the podcast game. I was aware of it, but I was just a late adopter. So I'm trying to find like a couple things like to listen to. My cousin's got one. I like his. It's kind of like. I'm not gonna say it's kind of like ours. First of all, it's like 10 of them, and they're like all like in 9 out of those 10 might be in some way, shape related to like like the church in some fashion, like worship leaders or something like that. But they're all black, and they're all talking about like how they've tackled a whole lot of stuff. They've gone through like a whole summer of like racial reckoning we've had over here, to sports and fatherhood and all that other stuff. And so I found that pretty interesting. Toy, you listen to a lot of podcasts?
Negative. Hardly ever listen to a podcast. If it's longer than 15 minutes, man, it's gonna be hard to get my attention.
So I listen to one in spurts. Like I'll listen to one. It might be an hour and a half. I'll listen to it 15 minutes at a time because it's gonna come back in my feed and let me know, hey, you ain't finished this. So
Hour and a half. That's like a movie.
dude.
I'm not quite. My attention span's not as bad as Toys. But I usually like to top out around 45 to like an hour on the long end.
Dude, you don't have to watch it in one sitting. It's online for a reason.
I like getting to the end of the chapter, finish the story.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's the thing. They're not talking about one thing. They're talking about multiple things.
I listen to a lot of TikToks.
Is that by choice or by what your daughters have going on?
No, that's by well. Initially, I got TikTok because of my daughters, because I wanted to see what TikTok was all about.
Right.
And now it's by choice, because once you start looking at them, they got a system to feed you what you normally look at, what you like to type. So it's straight comedy on there.
Okay.
That's one thing that the internet has shown me is that we have a lot of hilarious people.
We have a lot of stupid people.
That too, and you know a lot of the stupid dudes on campus were a lot of the most fun dudes on campus.
There's a TikTok dude that I listen to. I'm gonna have to find it and drop it in there for y'all. He be to his son in the car. His son will be like, Dad, why you be trying to eat women's cats? Man, I ain't eating no cat, man. What's wrong with you, man? You're not supposed to be eating an animal. Sean, it's not that kind of animal, man. You be doing it too.
I've seen him. I've seen him before. And the only thing that I can say about him is this. Like, it's the subject matter of some of the conversations to me at that age. So, I mean, like, if my son was 10, probably not. 15, 16, maybe. But
How old is he?
that little boy can't be 10.
Yeah,
8, 9.
he's somewhere around there, 8, 9, something like that.
So once I saw it, but did y'all see the video of the girl twerking in there with all the boys in there?
No.
There was a girl that was twerking, and there was a room full of boys, like 4 or 5 of them, like ranging from like the ages of 6 to like 9 or 10. And she was twerking in there. Hold on, Toy. Hold on. Then this woman decides to pull her pants down and bare her butt cheeks and be twerking in the room with them.
But this is a grown woman.
This is relative to them. She at least 16, 17 years old.
Okay.
18 years old.
Is that toxic femininity?
That is exactly all of that stuff. And that's one of the things I'm going to touch on. So, you know what? Let's just go ahead and get it started.
Yeah, let's just jump in.
All right.
But you know, Chelsea's grown now.
My dad.
What?
I'm absolutely pissed.
Why?
He didn't tell me. He had a boy. I tried 3 times. He said, no. This is how you do it. The word.
He said, Dad, I was just trying to make my car go faster. And that's when I knew what I had on my hands. And I was like,
Hey,
okay.
man. You got you a little engineer, man. You got you a little engineer.
I think you need to put that like a little disclaimer in there. When you say putting on a mask, you're not talking about COVID-related, like, you know, protection.
No. You're talking about the common term.
I got where he was going, but I'm just saying nowadays people may misconstrue.
Right, you got, yeah.
It's called a representative.
Here we go.
The representative.
And don't throw shoes at nobody.
Oh.
Playing this story.
Oh, we will. Oh, we will. Not today. Maybe on Dad's After Dark, but not today. Dude, really? You gonna bring that up on the first episode? At any given time, my kids ask me for something. Yes, I can afford it, but I tell them no, just to keep them in practice of hearing it. so that they will be successful and they will have something to rise up from when they get older, and they tell themselves yes more often than I do.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of This Is How You Dad. Of course, I got the dads with me. Good evening, fellas.
Good evening. What it do?
So we're here to talk about a very, very touchy subject. And what I'm hoping is that we can navigate this without necessarily getting way too serious, but still telling our perspective on it. And this is going to be a series, not just one episode. We're going to cover it throughout the year. And let's just say where this is a question that one of my best friends sent in, and here is the actual question. It says, "Can you talk about toxic masculinity? Does it in fact exist, or is it a conspiracy theory to emasculate men? If it does exist, what are some of the obvious and not so obvious ways in which it shows up in each of you, or ways in which you have observed?" That is a very, very, very good question. Thank you, B. Thank you,
Yeah.
Brandon.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
But so if we don't say it exists or not, we first got to define it. And I want everybody to say what they think it is, but the generally accepted definition of it has been um, somewhere along lines of traits that are typically associated with masculinity and the expectation that everybody that considers themselves to be a man has to conform to this blueprint, this old blueprint that was established back when men were men, as Archie Bunker would put it. Um, and you can't deviate from that. You can't not have something on that list. You can't have anything extra that's on that's not on that list. So, um, what are y'all guys? What are y'all's thoughts on what it actually is?
Scary cats. I think it's that's what it is.
That's the definition of it.
That's the definition of it. So toxic masculinity is simply nothing but conduct, bad conduct, and people have given it this label of toxic masculinity, and then they're dumping all kind of stuff into it. I think there is some bad conduct, no doubt about it. But let's just call it that, bad conduct. Just because it's conduct that's associated with some males, don't make it toxic masculinity. If a female did the same thing, too much of anything is bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's too much of something. If female did the same thing, it's still bad conduct. Does that female exhibit toxic masculinity? No.
No. But I have been on the receiving end of and at that time I didn't know what to term it or how to phrase it. But I have experienced what I would now consider to be toxic femininity. And it was someone that came to me and was like, "Oh, you're a man, you won't understand." I'm like, "You don't know what my life experience has been. You don't know what I've been through. I understand a lot of things that women go through because, as a straight man that lived in Atlanta for 10 years, as somebody that has had digestive issues my whole life and had several surgeries in my midsection, I understand the pains that women go through. I understand a lot because I had a lot of hands on by the women in my family because the men were always away working. So I've experienced. So yes, to answer your question, toxic femininity does exist, but we're not allowed to say that because men can't say the negative aspects of dealing with certain women. It's taboo. And I go ahead.
That's not the side I'm talking about. I'm talking about what if a woman exhibits quote unquote masculine traits? Hey, I'm strong, I'm tough, and it's over the top. Hey, you weakling. Is she exhibiting toxic masculinity?
No. That's so feminism is a well-needed movement. But just like you hand a gun to the wrong person, you give the correct tool to somebody that doesn't know how to use it, they're gonna use it inappropriately. Like you can be a well-intended person And we talked about this in the previous episode. ADW, you give somebody a tool, there's gonna be some people that misuse it. So no, I wouldn't say that's toxic masculinity. I would say that is a um, uh, poorly executed rendition of someone exerting their feminine power.
Exerting bad conduct, because there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. It's
Oh,
Well,
So
go ahead, Malik. I'll wait on you.
so I think it does exist only from the standpoint, like I hear what Antoy is saying, but from my understanding of it, it's when you excuse that bad behavior because a man's doing it, and if it were a woman or female doing it, you'd say that they couldn't do it, or you should only act this way because you are a male. So from that aspect, I think it does exist for some traits. Like I can understand what you're saying, where they try to lump everything, to label everything that way. But I do think there are some traits that you're like, oh, if it's a boy doing this, it's cool. But if it's a girl doing this, it's not. Like I hear what you're saying, Antoine, where you're basically saying I don't want anybody to exhibit these traits, male or female. So I understand.
Yeah. So, full disclosure for the audience, we have been talking about doing this episode for a few months, and we struggled with when to do it, how to do it, even do we even understand the topic well enough to discuss it? And in all those conversations, one thing I realized is I don't think the term toxic masculinity is something that was a mainstream term until recent years. And the word toxic and the word masculinity have been in the dictionary and have been defined as words in the English language and have translations into other languages for generations. It is just the combining of the two and taking those two words and saying, this is what these two words together mean, that I think is a relatively new concept. And so in order to have a conversation about toxic masculinity, the first thing you got to ask is what is it? Who came up with it? Why is it a thing? And before you can even get into toxic masculinity, I think you have to first define what is masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just in the discussion around what is masculinity is when you start to see some of those things that now are being boxed as toxic masculinity being defined. And what I think we have done as a society is we have related negative characteristics that any human being, regardless of gender, can exhibit with being masculine.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And like, for example, not showing your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
That is related with being masculine.
But I know plenty of females that do that.
Absolutely. That is unhealthy for any human being to do. Whether it's a male or female or anyone, binary, cisgender, that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
But it has been categorized as being masculine. Yeah. And so because you've already taken a negative concept and labeled it as masculine, when the effects, or let me say the results of exhibiting that behavior start to impact that individual and those around him, because it has been labeled with masculinity, it is the males that are mostly identified and categorized with having a problem with this issue. So I would also, and this is not to say that there are things that what I would say we teach males that are wrong that we should not teach. But what I would also say is we should be very careful about assigning negative character traits to any one gender and saying that that negative character trait belongs to that specific gender, because it actually doesn't, because we see it transpire being exhibited across all genders.
Yeah.
I think you have to be careful in you say assigning, I say excusing those
Right.
traits
Right, but
based
first,
on.
first you assign it, and then the where it starts to get into the toxic piece of it, and we'll go
Right.
into more about what we think toxic masculinity is. But that's when that excusing piece is where we start to perpetuate a habit as a culture of developing a specific group of people to have and be um, um, wear as a badge of honor negative characteristics, and that's what we have to unravel.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said a few things in there, and I'm one of the types of people where I don't like to necessarily look at where we are now as a first step. I want to take it back and say, how do we get here? And one of the things that I found out in my research and readings and looking stuff up is this is not a new term. It is one of those terms that was created back in the 80s and the 90s, but it just gained traction now. And I think it's gained traction now because uh, Me Too movement and all these things that are women are doing that that should have been done a long time ago, and now this term is being brought back up. And oddly enough, this term came into being because of a men's group. There was a group called the Mythopoetic Society, and basically it was a group of men that said, "Hey, manhood is changing, and it is changing for the worst." And I'm not going to say they had everything right, because there were a few things that they talked about that I don't necessarily agree with. But then again, me and agreeing with you is not necessarily make it right or wrong. Um, so one of the things that they said was that, hey, in current culture, men only really associate with men at work, and the rest of the time we at home with these women. And even again, back listening to my Dungeon Family music, uh CeeLo Green even had a verse where he was talking about, when you have male friends, you almost got to do the same thing for a living to have a male friend. And one of the things that they tried to combat was men spending time around men just doing manly stuff, and not necessarily putting a label on it, but just, if you're a young boy and all you do is spend time around women without a male influence, a male role model, there are going to be certain things that you're lacking. There are going to be certain images, certain patterns, certain things that you just don't understand unless you have that male role model. And so the term is not new, um, but the back then it was used as a self check, and now it's being used, I feel, a lot of the times as a weapon, and not necessarily, hey son, don't do this. It's, hey man, you're evil because. And so, um Chip, didn't you say one of your daughters said something to you?
Yeah, and I'm trying to come back to me on that one because I'm trying to remember all the details. I was just sitting here thinking, what happened when she said that.
so so let's talk about this. You reminded me of something else too. I was watching this show, and there was this woman who said she wanted a masculine man. And what she said was, if my man is supposed to go to work, come home, and I wait on him hand and foot. Now, this was not something in the 50s. This was like early 2000s. This woman said that. She said, and I think it was on Dr. Phil. She said, if my man comes home and tries to wash clothes, cook, or do the dishes, I will lose respect for him. So
What's wrong with that? That's her preference. I don't see nothing wrong with that.
I get
You won't
that.
respect me.
I get that.
I agree with
That
you,
is her
Angela.
preference.
I see your point. You're right.
My question is this: is that toxic femininity?
I'm not gonna say that's toxic femininity, like in the way that you just described, like this particular lady's viewpoint. I think it's kind of a misguided situation, and the reason I'm saying misguided is how practical is it to if I'm down to my last pair of drawers and I'm sitting around waiting for my wife to do the laundry, and she happens to have a real busy week and it hasn't gotten to it in time, am I supposed to just be free balling now at this point?
Sorry,
I know
go
how to
Vegas.
do
It's
laundry.
okay.
I
Go
know how to
Vegas.
do
It's okay.
laundry. I knew how to do laundry before I left home to go to college. I did my own laundry for 4 years through college and several years after college, and then several years after I got married.
Hey man,
Why should I go without?
take a Sharpie and draw a flap on the front of some of her drawers. You'd be good.
Nah, man, I'm all right.
Hey,
Couldn't fit.
So you knew how to do laundry before college, but you didn't know how to check mail.
full transparency.
Wait, hold on.
I prefer to do the laundry
All right.
because when I do the laundry and I'm sitting and I'm folding clothes, nobody bothers me with what's on the television. I can watch my football game, my basketball game, whatever it is I want to watch, and everyone leaves me alone while I'm folding clothes.
That's
And
a good
there's
cheat code.
nothing wrong with you folding clothes either.
Nothing wrong.
So hold on.
Plus, whenever they fold the clothes, I refold them anyway because they don't do it the way they don't do it as good as I do it.
Right.
So to touch on some stuff that was said by a lot of y'all, so I've been quiet for a minute. I'm gonna start with something that Toy said, where he was talking about, okay, if you had a woman exhibiting all these different behaviors and all that stuff, and you just termed it overall bad behavior, but you also asked the question, is that toxic femininity? I won't say that my opinion on this whole toxic behavior thing is probably going to wind up evolving, because I found the more I've read on this, the more my opinion has changed on stuff.
Good.
To answer your question, Toy, yes, that all that I would call it toxic femininity, and to be honest with you, it's on TV all the time. Real Housewives of pick a city and all that. I mean, I joke with my wife; she likes watching reality TV shows and all that stuff. And I've said that, but I mean, it's entertainment for her. She likes the fact that she doesn't have to think too much while she's watching it. She calls it entertainment. I mean, I just joke around. I say it's Real Housewives of slap a whole county, because everyone's trying to prove who's the biggest, baddest woman, slapping everybody up. But I also think that as much as people want to pardon it or dismiss it because this is entertainment, there are real world consequences for this type of stuff.
Yeah.
For example, and I don't remember the name of the show, but I do remember that it was a big deal when it happened, and this had to be somewhere in the neighborhood of a decade ago, because I remember Landon was really, really young at that point. On one of these shows, there was a girl who, I mean, it's your typical reality show where you have, I don't know, a handful of women trying to prove who's the biggest, baddest girl, they're the diva of this, that, and the next thing, and this girl don't like that one, and unless security steps in, somebody's throwing a bottle or a drink or something like that. Well, one of them was dating Ocho Cinco, and I don't remember if he actually did it or not, but word was out that he actually put hands on her. And keep in mind, whoever this girl was the one who, on this show, because I got to hear and watch a lot of it because Cam liked to watch them, she was always carrying on like she was 10 feet tall and bulletproof, slapping down everybody. Anybody stand up, I'm slapping them down. This was her MO. And here it is, you've been trying to promote yourself as the biggest, baddest person out there for about I don't know, half a season and all that. And then you finally
got Rousey.
Pardon?
She got Ronda Rousey.
Now, I don't even think Ocho Cinco did all that to her. But the fact of the matter is, he's bigger, right? Someone was bigger and badder than you were, and now all of a sudden you crying, "Oh my God, he had no right to put his hands on me," and blah 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 blah. Full disclosure, no, I don't think that he had a right to put his hands on her. However, it's hard for me to go on ahead and pardon
Wait,
pardon
did
your
she
behavior and all that.
did, did she touch him first?
Probably.
Okay, no. If
No, I
she
mean
touched him
no.
first,
This incident. Hold on. This incident did not happen on the TV cameras. Let me go on and say that. Maybe I'm misrepresenting the situation. This was something that happened, I guess, in their relationship, and things were out there in the news. And because the cameras were always following her around, and he'd actually been on a couple episodes, I guess they decided to address the situation, right?
okay, I'm gonna go on camera and state a toxic male trait: letting women put hands on you as if there are no consequences for them not keeping their
Okay, so
hands to themselves.
I fully agree with you on that. I tend to believe you can take gender out of it. If you're gonna put your hands on somebody like you 10 feet tall, you know what? Be prepared to deal with somebody who doesn't see you as a female, or see you as a male, but who sees you as somebody who put their hands on them, and now all of a sudden you got to deal with that. But to answer your question, Toy, yeah, I think there is definitely toxic femininity. Some people are very toxic with their behavior. So they're toxic with their language. That's male or female. I don't think it should be excused. But the more that I've read about toxic masculinity and why I think my opinion is changing on it, um, is just because as I've read it, toxic masculinity and hegemonic masculinity seem to be intertwined with each other. And I was unaware of hegemonic masculinity before I started just looking this up. So let me just read a definition real quick for anybody who may not have figured it out. All right. Hegemonic masculinity is defined as practice that legitimizes men's dominant position in society and justifies the subordination of the common male population and women and other marginalized ways of being a man. So I think that's a real fancy way of another article that I read, put it a lot more basic in my opinion and easier to understand. Toxic masculinity, we all have a rough idea of what it is. It's something that goes ahead and promotes a whole alpha male, dominant, almost Neanderthalic type of way of definition of manhood. You're supposed to go on ahead and dominate everything under your domain. That includes women, people who are not, who are different than you, your job situations, et cetera, et cetera. Any situation comes up, you are dominant over. Hegemonic masculinity, according to one of the articles that I read, actually, like a lot of things in this country, kind of brings in a slight racial component. And so I'm not going to say that I'm by any means what's the word I'm looking for? An expert on that. But the racial component was hegemonic masculinity brings in a romanticized version of white male dominance, which could go on ahead and explain a lot of how American society has been set up. Traditionally, we've all heard the thing, it's a white man's world. And so as a result of all of that, we've had several hundred years worth of white male dominance in just about any given situation that we've had in society here. So I think that hegemonic masculinity, one of the things that seems to be a defining characteristic is self-reliance and belief in one's own athletic dominance over situations. I don't necessarily think those two pieces of it are bad. There's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with self-reliance. Sure, it might be easier for me to ask for assistance on something, but if it's something that I can personally do, and it might take me a little while longer, but hey, I don't have to go on and be a burden on somebody else. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's something that all young men should go through and be able to figure out. I don't think that's necessarily a toxic trait. I think it's part of being younger and adolescence and growing up and finding yourself in manhood, regardless of how dominant or undominant, I guess, a type of man you are.
But everything needs to sit on a spectrum somewhere, and anything can have too little or too much of it. And if you're a type of person where anytime something happens, you're reaching out and you're crying for help, it's a problem. It's not a problem with your manhood, it's a problem with your maturity. Your situations are constantly outgrowing your ability. So that's a maturity thing. But if you're the type of person that gets into a situation that you're prepared for, and it just turns out to be more stringent than what you can take care of. But if you're so self-reliant, if you're so stuck on, I need to do this myself, to where you don't reach out and ask for help from one of your people in your corner, because I'm a man, because I don't need help, then that's a problem. So self-reliant in and of itself is not the issue.
No, the reason I
It's
brought it up is because in the things that I've read, looking this over, and like I said, my view on everything is starting to evolve as I'm digging deeper. I'm not
right.
necessarily agreeing with everything that I'm reading, but
Hey, Ian, I think the reason why you may be finding your viewpoint changing,
mm,
because to have that conversation around toxic masculinity and to have a viewpoint that can kind of be consistent about it would mean that the definition of toxic masculinity is set in stone. And I think when you go out and you read different things, you may find different variations of how that is interpreted. And because you're reading different interpretations of toxic masculinity, you find your viewpoint, not, I won't say that it's shifting, but what it is your viewpoint is aligning to that definition of toxic masculinity.
yeah,
So,
it's your starting point, and as you learn more, you realize that may have been you see where the flaws in that viewpoint may have been.
well, I don't even
It's
think it's about
evolution.
flaws. It's the thing is, no one has ownership over what defines toxic masculinity.
And you always have to consider the source, because depending upon who's saying it, it could have a totally different meaning. Like if somebody is a male coach, they're a life coach and they specialize in at-risk youth, I would be, and they believe that it exists, and they work on um working those type of traits out of young men, or making it so that they're on in the right area of the spectrum of those behaviors, as opposed to somebody that is, and I'm probably going to get in trouble saying this, somebody saying, oh, all women are perfect and don't have no problems, and woman good, man bad. I wouldn't believe anything that they had to say on the topic, because they're jaded to a point of, you know, thinking the earth is flat.
Right, but again, the reason I brought up self-reliance is because it's shown up in multiple places that I've read, but it always came up in the concept of self-reliance is a masculine trait. Just like they also said belief in your athletic ability, right? Like your own athletic ability is traditionally a masculine trait. And every time that they brought that up, I mean, they also threw in homophobia. They threw in what's the word? Xenophobia to a degree. You
Mm-hmm.
know, all of those things were coded as negative, and all of those things were associated as male traits. They're obviously traits that are not only just tied to males.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of very self-reliant women, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say in some cases to a fault or to their detriment. Just like I know
Yeah.
some self-reliant men to their fault, to their detriment in some cases. In
Mm-hmm.
other places, it's a virtue. I
Right.
don't see that as being a bad thing.
No,
Athletic
again,
arrogance and all that. I had athletic arrogance when I was younger, 25. Jay, you lived with me when I went through my kickboxing phase.
yeah.
Kickbox, amateur kickbox. I took an amateur kickboxing match in Atlanta just before my MBA program.
But you weren't arrogant about it.
Oh, but no, I had athletic arrogance, I think. I mean, I know that I wasn't the biggest, baddest man out there.
Here's what it
And
is.
nine times out of 10, I like my chances if I needed to square up with somebody.
Yeah.
The thing, nobody's not going to say you aren't a man because you're athletic, right? But where it comes in is you're not a man because you're not
Right.
athletic.
Right.
And I went to this conference that was put on by Mark, which is Men Advocating for Real Change. And it came about when we first started discussing whether we were going to discuss this topic. And it was very timely because toxic masculinity was one of the topics of discussion. And this man named Tony Porter, he has a TED talk where he talks about toxic masculinity and tries to kind of define it and by what he calls the man box. And in the man box, what he puts it, what he points out, and this isn't, don't think that this is, and I don't think this is into his intention either, is for it to be the full all encompassing bullet point list for what toxic masculinity is. But I think what he's trying to do is come up with trying to list some of those traits, at least a high level, some big ticket item bullet points that I think a lot of people can relate to in defining it. And I'm gonna just run through them real quick. One of them was do not cry openly or express emotion unless it's anger. Do not express weakness or fear. Demonstrate power and control, especially over women. Aggression and dominance. Be a protector. Do not be like a woman. Be heterosexual. Don't be like a gay man. Be tough, athletic, strong, and courageous. Make decisions and don't need help, which goes back to your point about self-reliance, Ian. And the last one was view women as property or objects. And when I heard that list, I can go back into my childhood and
see you being shown that,
or being told to be that way as a kid. Now, and seeing the images around me, the music that was being played, what you would see on TV, for the most part, basically saying that is correct. If you are not doing these things, then you are not a man.
So here's a question. Two-part question. One of the questions that was asked in the original question is this a theory to emasculate men? And of those things that you just listed, have you, after you learned of that list, can you recall any times in your adult life where you've done those things?
Yes. I can recall being told not to do. So let's take the don't cry, accept anger. Okay.
Right.
Exactly what I was told. Stop crying. Suck it up. Hold it in. Be strong. And the only time I would not be told to do that is if I was crying because I was enraged. So if on the schoolyard I got into a fight and I was crying while I was fighting, I was not considered weak. Okay, now it's different if you're crying. It was different for if you were crying because you were getting beaten up. But like for me, for instance, when I was a young kid, I would cry before it would ever go down. Because of how mad I was.
Exactly.
And when it was all over, nobody said that I was weak because I cried. It was Chip was so mad that he cried.
When me and Ian were living together,
let it out, right?
When Ian and I were living together, I told him a rule like, hey, if you ever see me start to cry before, take me and move me.
Right.
Move
and
me.
Fear, weakness, a lot of that is taught. Like I got a lot of that when it came to like sports, right? Don't be afraid, don't be weak, blah, 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 blah. And on that one in particular, I think that in a lot of ways, when I think back on it, it wasn't that I don't really think they were trying to communicate that you're not going to feel those things. I think what they were really trying to say, I didn't get it then, but I think what they were really trying to say is don't let that hinder you from doing what you have to do. Don't let that paralyze you.
I also think you have to take into account, like, quite frankly, the generation we grew up in, and who our role models or our caretakers were. Like, we all came up round about, like, I don't know the exact year everybody was born, but I'm gonna guess everybody was born late 80s to possibly the late 70s to the early 80s. Probably like, you know, no, I don't think anyone on this
No, everybody
list
was
here
born.
79 and down.
Everybody was born before 80s.
All right, I was about to say I didn't even think everybody, like, you know, the youngest one out of us here may have been like, you know, 1982. All right,
No,
but if everyone's like 79 and earlier,
I'm a prodigy. I was born in '84. I just didn't know I was younger than y'all.
okay.
This the dude that thought I cheated on everything.
Anyway, the point I'm
Hey,
trying to
I
make
heard
is,
that again last night that Jay with a full beard in the 6th grade. Hey, that's
the point I was trying to make is this: definitions of manhood have evolved, I believe, from like, you know, what was manly, you know, back when our caretakers were like, you know, raising us up and trying to tell us what men should be. Those, and quite frankly, I'm not sure how all of your parents grew up. My parents kind of came up like, you know, from the Caribbean. My parents are Caribbean. You had very basic ideas of like, you know, what was men's roles, women's roles. I think my parents raised me to be like, you know, very like I have some very like, you know, traditional Caribbean like, you know, ways, I think, just in terms of what was put in front of me in terms of, okay, this is how you do, but at the same time, it wasn't all rough. Just like, you know, I didn't know all of your parents, but, you know, some people may have had like, you know, very like, you know, very strict authoritarian fathers and all of that. My dad was an authority figure, but I found a lot of his like, you know, a lot of his rules and authority weren't just based on a man hearing me roar. It was more so like, son, this is what you have to do in order to grow up to be a respectable man. I'm going to model this and hope that you are picking up what it is I'm putting down and try to live accordingly. But his views were like formed by his father, and his father, you know, was a carpenter back in Guyana. He, to me, like, you know, was a very like, you know, from what I understand, I knew him as like an older man. My grandfather Dandy, rest his soul. He was always sweet by the time I knew him. But like hearing stories from like, you know, how he was growing up, you know, they used to call him like, you know, no, not him, excuse me. They used to call his brother Stud. His brother was a ladies' man. His brother ran all over like Guyana and was like, you know, that's how he earned his nickname, right? Mm-hmm. Things like that. Now, that's not the way my dad brought me up. Even though it stands to reason, my dad would have been influenced by by his uncle, my grandfather's uncle. I'm not even sure how you're supposed to like, you know, my grandfather's brother. I'm not sure what that line is to me.
That's your uncle.
That's your great uncle.
Great uncle. Thank you. The things of that nature. So, I mean, like, you know, right now we're in a society where like, you know, we're placing more importance on like emotional stability or emotional IQ or how you're raising your male children, not to be quote unquote toxic, which means now we're encouraging our boys to be in touch with their feelings. All that would have been viewed as very, very like, you know, unmanly back in the day.
Yeah. What you got to say, Toy?
Go ahead.
No, what you got to say, Toy?
So I got a couple things. One is I tell my daughters don't cry. Hey, don't cry. Why do I tell my daughters don't cry? Because at that time, what you're crying over is inappropriate to cry about. In my opinion, that thing is nothing. That's not a time to cry about that. You know, not don't ever cry, but the thing the thing that you're crying about, there's nothing to cry about. Don't do it. You know, that's not toxic masculinity. Just because I'm telling you don't cry, or suing in nothing but the males don't cry. And then second, I'm glad you brought up being from the Caribbean. So this idea of toxic masculinity is so subjective. You know, I call it, but the proper word though is subjective. You know, what you think is not even just toxic masculinity. What we think is masculine in another culture, they don't think that's masculine. In another culture, the females go out and hunt and gather. You know, in another culture, the males take care of the kids. You know, so you got to look at, you know, what culture are you coming from? You know, is this a toxic masculinity trait? I say, you know, this thing is It's conduct that we're referring to, not
Yeah.
put a label on it. And
I when I was looking up some stuff, because to Chip's point, I got this email on October 24th of last year. So that's how long we've been talking about this. Um, in other cultures, to what Anto is saying, men walk around in the street holding hands, and it no thought of it. I learned this weekend that there is an African culture, an African tribe, where men breastfeed the children.
How that
Didn't
work?
even know.
How?
Yeah,
Huh?
how's that gonna work?
Dude, it's all hormones. The men have high prolactin.
you can milk anything with nipples, man. They told you that.
Yes, yes. There are men in the United States that have a hormone imbalance that
Hey.
lactate.
I got C in biology.
That's fine.
Yeah, we didn't cover this in G Bio.
Yeah.
Man.
You're not supposed to know this because
know this.
you're not supposed to know this. Just
So,
like
so,
there's
so is
certain
that an example of toxic masculinity? The fact
No.
that they didn't let us know
exactly
that can happen.
just like they didn't teach us about all the race massacres, just like they didn't teach us how black people had property and it was stolen both legally and illegally and it was never given
Right.
back to them. You're not supposed to know this because it doesn't follow the narrative. But we were talking about crying, and I have a cry rule. I have a set of crying rules. If you had something painful happen to you, hey, that's fine. If we're outside working and you smash your finger with a hammer or you cut your leg open and you bleed and stuff like that, that's fine. If you do something that's wrong and I bring it to your attention, you don't cry. Let's sit here and let's talk about it. You caused this. You did this. I'm correcting you. You don't get to cry about that. We're going to sit here and think about it, and I'm going to help you understand where you went wrong. And I also have a location thing. I don't want my children to grow up letting their the people that they think are their friends knowing where their triggers are. So my rule on that is you can cry at home. You can cry around me. You can cry around your uncles and your aunts when we're in private and you want to talk about it. That's fine. But just out in public when you're upset and you're not physically hurt, save that for when you're in your known safe space because all these people that you think are your friends, they could be looking for ammunition. They could be looking for, hey, this is how I can trigger this person. This is how I can get them to cry. And so by default, because they're crying, I won. And I'm kind of like Toy when I say, hey, this is nothing that you should be crying about. But the only thing that I've caught myself saying that repeatedly is you did something wrong. Own it. Stop crying and own it. And let me discipline you. Let me get this behavior up out of you and let's move on.
But I found that like if kids are crying over like something that they've done, right? Usually, it's because of fear of repercussions, right? There's some kind of sanction that's likely coming by virtue of the fact that they have done something and they are now so scared by that they are going to cry. Now, we've all got like we have a different distribution, I guess, in terms of like those of us who have males and females as far as children here. So I'm gonna ask this. Well, to you it might not matter, but everybody else may not have the same answer, which is why I'm gonna ask this question. All right. You just mentioned you have a cry rule, and you're trying to tell your children, keep that for at home. Certain situations may come up to
A
where
safe space, not home.
a safe space. Excuse me, a safe space. But sometimes life comes at you when you're not in a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, when you're telling your children don't cry, or when you're encouraging your children don't cry, are you doing it because they're not in a safe space or because you don't want to see them do it? Now, I'll be honest with you. When Landon was younger, I encouraged him not to cry when he ran into things or when he hurt himself. But it wasn't because I was so like, embarrassed about having my boy cry. Quite frankly, it's because I remember when I cried as a kid, I got a headache. So as a result of that, it hurt me. It sucked. I don't cry much anymore. I can't remember the last time I have cried because I don't like having headaches.
Oh man, I
So
cry at least two,
And
three
I know,
times a year.
I'm not about to say that everybody else has that same reaction because I don't think a lot of people do have that reaction.
No, I
now
get headaches too.
I will say that I definitely agree with Jason on that point about not letting people know your triggers, because there are people out there that once they know what it is, they will try to use it against you, um, um, to manipulate you, to use you, to frame you, to cause harm to you. And we do, as fathers, have a responsibility to help our children learn how to protect themselves. So
Right.
I have this conversation with my son. When you get mad at one of your classmates, you have a disagreement with one of your classmates, um, or even his sisters. His sisters they are experts at pushing his buttons. Right? It's like they know exactly what to do to make him explode, and they do it, and then they sit back and eat their popcorn and watch the show. You know, and that's what I try. That it started with his sisters. I'm trying to tell him, look, you are losing because you are doing exactly what they want you to do, which is to lose control.
Hmm.
That's all they want, is to see you lose control and hurt yourself in the process.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I do agree with Jason that I do tell my son not to exhibit those emotions immediately. Perfect example. I told him, hey, look, and I think I said this in a previous podcast, but same point. If someone does something wrong to you and cops show up and you're the one that's hysterical and you're the one that's out of control and the other person isn't, the cops are going to think you are the one that they're there for.
Hmm.
And you are going to be the one in the back seat of the cop car if you're lucky.
Would you give
If
the
you
same
make it,
advice?
if you make it there.
Are you giving the
Right.
same advice to your daughters? And if not, if so, why? If not, why?
Well, I will say this. I have those conversations with my daughter, not nearly as much. And that's just because they don't have, that's not really an issue for them, right?
Hmm.
They don't blow up.
They don't have somebody pushing their buttons.
Right. Well, I don't think that, I truly do believe, I do believe in that women mature faster than men.
Mhm.
And so on average,
Because here I am, 43.
a teenage female and a teenage male are not at the same level and they're not as in control of their emotions. Okay. And so I don't have that conversation with my daughters as much, just because I haven't seen the need to. It doesn't mean that I haven't, but it happens more frequently with my son. And so therefore I have to address it more with my son. If we had that conversation once and then he's like, I got it, then we move on, right?
Right.
But to that point, I'm not telling him that he is less of a man because he feels that way. What I'm trying to tell him is, when he reacts that way, it's not necessarily going to help him achieve his goal.
Right.
Hmm.
So
And that's what I get at. So even when, so let's take the one where you run into the wall and start crying or whatever. I immediately tell them, look at me, stop crying, look at me. Because what I want them to focus on is the fact that they're not as actually as hurt as they think they are.
right.
Mhm.
And sometimes what you need to get, so even if they are hurt, what you need to get someone to do in order to have better control over the situation and start working to making it better is to get them to calm down.
Mm.
So it's not that I am punishing them for feeling that way. It's more of, okay, I need you to gather yourself so we can figure out how to fix this and move on.
Yeah. You brought up something, and then I'm gonna let Toy say something because he has something to say. I agree that emotionally women mature a lot faster, and I think that is 100% the case because they're allowed to process their emotions. And young boys are said emotions are for what? Because there's this thought that you can be rational or you can be emotional. There's no way that you can have thoughts about your feelings. There's no way that you can have your thoughts dictate how you feel about something. So I think that this service has been done by not showing young boys, hey, when you start feeling like this is how it's going to hit you, and this is how you react by default. But you have the option to choose a different route. You can, once you start feeling this, you should know what you're getting ready to do and say, okay, you know, flight or fight. And am I going to blow up or am I going to handle the situation? Excuse me. What are you going to say, Toy?
Yeah, so we talked about self-reliance, and then we talked about crying, and in both of them we mentioned maturity levels.
Mhm.
So my question is, if I say, "Hey, you need to grow up," is that okay? But if I say, "Hey, you need to man up," is that bad?
I don't think either one of them are good or bad. I think it depends on the context in which you use it at the time.
Consider the source.
Consider the source. Because here's the thing. I think boys want to be men. They want to be men. And so if relating a positive reaction to being manly achieves the goal of getting them to go in the right direction, then I don't see anything wrong with saying man up. Okay, if you're
If
telling
they
them to take,
understand what you mean.
yeah. So for example, if my son is trying to be irresponsible or justify his being irresponsible or not taking accountability for his mistakes, and I tell him to man up, I think I'm saying something positive because men, I'm talking to a future man
Mm-hmm.
before growing into a man. I'm trying to teach him how to make that progression. So, in me telling him that the behavior that he's exhibiting is not right,
Mm-hmm.
and I want him to be right, and if it takes me making a correlation to that being what you should do as a man to get the point across, then that is what I'm going to say, and I have said it. You know,
Yeah.
when I tell him I know you did this and you're lying to me, man
Mhm.
up and accept the consequences for your actions. I don't think I'm telling him anything wrong.
And I don't
I'm
have any
speaking to him that
daughters.
way. It doesn't mean that I won't do the same thing with my daughters. I will tell them the same, but obviously I won't say man up because they're not men.
Right.
Okay.
I don't have any daughters. I have a niece, and she's already showing her personality. And I know 100% that I'm gonna have to tell her to woman up. I know it.
So I would argue that a lot of people on the toxic masculinity train would say, "Hey, that's a toxic masculinity trait that you're teaching."
And
Again,
I would say that I totally disagree because they're missing the point of the lesson that I'm trying to teach. It's all about the lesson that you're trying to teach.
consider the source.
You know, you have to consider the source. You know, I can't tell him to be something that he is not, right? I can't tell him to be a Martian. He ain't a Martian. Okay. He isn't. Okay. He is genetically a male. Okay. And me telling him to just like so. Let me give the antithesis of that, which is me talking to my daughters. All right. If I want them to own up to their mistakes, I'm going to teach them that same lesson. It's no different than if I'm talking to my son or my daughter. I just might use some different words to teach the same message. And if some outsider looking in wants to pass judgment on how I'm doing that or the words that I'm using to do that, honestly, I don't care because they're not the ones that live in this house that wiped their butts when they were babies and changed their diapers and got spit up on and everything else that it took to take care of them. They don't pay the bills. They don't feed them.
As
So
long as they're not a member, as long as they're not a member of CPS.
but the whole point is, you can disagree with me on how I may be going about it, but if
But
you're disagreeing,
understand the message.
understand the message that I'm trying to teach. If you have a problem we teaching my son to be accountable, then we can't even start that discussion,
Right.
right?
That's
And I'm
fair.
not going to listen to anything that you have to say because I believe that he should be accountable. I
So,
believe that we all should be accountable.
so let me ask this, because like you all have made reference to before, we've been kicking this idea around for a while now, like before we were actually bringing it to this podcast. One of the notes that I have when we were just like defining the question and all that, and Jay, you may have mentioned this before in terms of like, the question that B asked, but one of the questions that was asked, or that I thought was asked, was toxic masculinity created to emasculate Black men, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all raising children. We're all Black, so we are all raising Black children, right? How do you address that piece of it? And
So
or
it,
what is everybody's take on that piece? I guess that's what I wanted to drive into.
so here's my thing on that, and I'm gonna say this even though I've said it several times before. You have to consider the source because there are women out here that holler equality but don't want to have the same level of accountability for all the negative things that come along with being masculine. So there are things that I just can't do as a man. Like it is culturally acceptable for a woman, if a man did something wrong to her, to walk up and slap him and then walk off, and the man is just supposed to take it. Right? That's not equitable. There are women that will sit here and yell toxic masculinity, but have those types of behaviors. So those types of people, I feel, are trying to emasculate me, but I don't care because once I see those types of people, I cut them out of my life and my existence altogether if I can. So I can't say that the term itself was coined to emasculate men. I can say that there were people that had that on their agenda and they latched onto this term and saw it as a way to do it. Hey, this is happening. This is something that I can use to further what I've always wanted to do. And so I don't think it was. I know for a fact because of I researched where the term came from, and it was not created with that purpose, but it is now being used for positive things. It is being used to help men understand that you can raise a man that does not fit other people's stoic viewpoints on what a man is and always was, all the way to people, you know, hating men.
What about
You
the
know,
rest of y'all? What's y'all's opinion on that?
So now this goes back, kind of bring it full circle around when my daughter used that comment with me.
mm,
Um, at the time, I was I was getting after her and her sister about about cleaning the kitchen. Okay. And I was saying that they needed to go and clean the kitchen. And she threw out, the term toxic masculinity and saying that, you know, that to the point of that, um, uh, somehow she said something that my toxic masculinity, I'm just using my toxic masculinity to try to get them to do something. And I said, hold on, wait a minute, time out. I said, first of all, you need to make sure you truly understand what that term means before you just go around and throwing it around and using it.
Because she heard it in school.
Yeah, and she heard it somewhere. And I said, I bet you don't even know what that means. All right. It's 14-year-old, okay? 14-year-old daughter. And I said, but don't mistake me being a parent and parenting you and making sure that you're contributing as everyone should around this house um, as toxic masculinity. Because it doesn't matter whether that came from me or your mom, we are parents.
Mm.
And when we
Mhm.
ask you to do something or tell you to do something in this house to contribute with sustaining this house, you need to do it because you live here too. And your mom and I are not your maids.
Right. I
And
wonder if she had said the same thing to Lorraine.
probably not,
Mm.
probably not. But I made sure to address it. I actually really took offense to it because, I consider myself a very involved dad, you know, and just as quickly as I'll tell you to go and wash the dishes, I will definitely sit right next to you and stay up all night with you doing your homework.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so you don't get to pick and choose when to try to put me into a box um, um, because you don't want to do something and you want to just be lazy.
Right. Now, what she saying? Oh, here's this man making me do domestic work. Now, but it was already her chore, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, really, the way I look at it, my wife and I should never have to clean the kitchen.
I don't.
Right.
I mean,
The only
we have provided them with shelter, food, and
Right.
safety.
you know when I touch the trash, when I throw it in my trash can. That's
I
it.
that they are of age. The whole point is I am trying to raise kids to go out and be responsible, self-reliant, in a healthy way, adults, which
Say that's
means
not
Parenting.
toxic.
you know, knowing how gender is excluded. You need to know how to take out the trash. You need to know how to wash your dishes. You need to know how to cook. You need to know how to wash and fold clothes. You just need to know how to do that as a human being
Mhm.
because that is you taking care of yourself.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay. And so, yeah, when she said that, I definitely took it as this is her saying dad's being, exuding toxic masculinity because he's trying to tell me that I should do something domestic. No, you need to do it because that's what you need to do because those dishes are dirty and your brother did it last night and now it's your turn.
Yeah. Um. So the last bit was asking us to look at ourselves and point out some things that we may or may not have done. We point out things that we've done that were obvious or not so obvious things that somebody today might consider to be toxic masculinity. And I have to be honest with myself. There was a period in my younger adult years, this is probably still when I was living in Atlanta, where it wasn't a conscious thing, but I did think that if you were a woman that ran into me, that automatically meant that I was probably more intelligent than you. I can honestly say that. And it didn't hit me that I had, again, it wasn't a conscientious thing. I just went back and started replaying some of my interactions with people. And it probably wasn't until I went out to Seattle and started working with people that have been working with Microsoft, 10, 15 years, and really seeing women just demonstrate their sheer mastery of their subjects, from people at director level on down, where I had to really check myself. Again, it was never on a, oh, I'm man, you're woman, you're beneath me type of thing. It was, um, um, I guess you would call them microaggressions, or me excusing the, like when somebody does something racist and a white person says, "Oh, they was just joking around." I would be around men that were really being offensive, and I would laugh at it, and I'm like, "Oh, he's just kidding," and the women would be like, "No, he's being a jerk." And it took me a while to really uh catch how I was participating in actually excusing those bad behaviors. And again, this was before anybody really threw the term toxic masculinity around, but I can definitely say that it has been a part of my adulthood in bursts. um
I refuse to say toxic masculinity has been a part. Now, we can talk about some conduct,
and that's fine.
and so one of the things in my household, all women, I'm the only male. Like Chip said, you should know how to do everything, as part of life and part of growing up. But in my house, I'm the only one that take the trash out of the trash can and into the big trash receptacle and down out for the garbage truck to pick up. Now, I've taught all my daughters, here, you're going to come with me. I'm going to show you how to do this. Here's how you do it. And I say, all right, now I don't ever want you to touch it again. I got it. That's what I'm going to do. Right. That's when we go to fuel up a car, I get the car and pump the gas. That's my job. I got it. Here, let me show you how to do it. Because if you need to do it, you need to know how to do it. But that's my job. I fuel up this car, and I don't have a problem with it.
Hey,
but do you tell them when you get married, you still shouldn't be doing this?
Yeah, when I do. I tell them, hey, if it's a male around, that male should be doing that.
Okay, yeah.
But you need to know how to do it, though.
Here's the other thing too, and then I'm gonna touch on it with some personal experiences within my own house. As I think another thing that doesn't get discussed is how women also participate in the process of teaching males toxic behaviors that are now categorized as toxic masculinity.
Yes.
This is not something that men do to men. And so we end up being that way because we learned it from a man. Very many of us learn it from women.
Because the
because
abundant of people are growing up in single parent homes where it is just the mother.
Absolutely. And not only that, but we're also saying, just to that point, the man should take out the trash. The man should do this. The man should do that. Let me tell you what, when a bug is around in my house, you know who they come to?
You.
Me. It's my responsibility. It goes back to being a protector, right? Mm-hmm. That is my responsibility. The women in my household say that is my responsibility. They're not going near it.
But being a protector is also one of the things that was described as being a toxic masculinity trait.
Be that way. And so our furnace was acting up, and then the control board needed to be replaced. AC guy came over and said, yeah, I can fix it, but tomorrow I'm going on vacation for a month. But here's how you do it. Who do you think climbed in that attic for 2 hours
Right.
and
Hey,
and worked on it. It
was
was me.
Gabe wanting to do it with you?
Gabe, of course he did. Of course, Gabe wanted to be right there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Matter of fact, I had him holding a flashlight. Uh, but there are expectations um, of what is considered to be my responsibility, and here's the thing: most of them I'm perfectly fine with, right? But um, and the other thing is, it's not only those, but those that would not be considered kind of a man's job. I'm expected to do those too.
But here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, though. Did you walk in the room, beat your chest, say, "Woman, shut up. I got this. This is what I'm gonna do. This is what I'm not gonna do. Everything I'm not gonna do, you better do, or we gonna have a problem." I just don't see that being how it went.
No, of course.
And if you as a partner to another person come to them and say, "Hey, this is what I understand your role should be, and this is what I understand my role should be," and then you flip it, and then y'all have that conversation and hash it out. Whatever y'all agree on in y'all's house, them's the rules. It shouldn't be in. And if you do more of the traditional male things, that's fine. I don't think that that's an issue. I think the issue is that if toxic masculinity exists, what needs to be taught is how to navigate the conversation about roles as you interact with different people,
Right.
not the "this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do." What you should do is make sure that everybody understands who does what. Everybody understands that I have a different skill set than you, and you do the things you're good at and leave the stuff that I'm good at for me, because I can get it done quicker, better, and cheaper. So
Now I'll tell you the one of those things that is kind of characterized as toxic masculinity that I do know growing up I had an issue with was expressing emotion.
mm.
Other than when I was mad and like I was gonna fight somebody at school or something.
Oh, so Gabe gets it honest, huh?
He gets it honest. Uh, but as far as like sharing my feelings and putting my feelings into words,
Mm-hmm.
um, that is something I've had to work on over time. And I'm not going to even sit here and say I'm good at it even to this day, but I know that that is something that I thought I was supposed to do, was to not express it. But over time, I realized that that's unhealthy. And even my mom, I remember my mom told me, she's gonna be mad that I said this on camera, but she said, because what would happen to me, leaving it in, is I would get stressed out, I would get migraine headaches, so on and so forth. And my mom knew that's what it was, and she would always tell me, you got to let it out, right? And then one time she said, Chip, sometimes you just have to say. And I was probably in like the seventh or eighth grade. My eyes got big, and I looked at my mom, and she was like, "Yeah, I said it."
He was like,
Oh
yes.
Yeah, and that really did. I never forgot it, obviously, but that did kind of help me to start the process,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out how to get those emotions out in a healthy way, and how to express myself in a positive manner to where I could tell people, hey, that did make me feel disrespected, or that made me, you actually did hurt my feelings, and be more productive in getting that off of my chest instead of
Mm-hmm.
carrying it around inside.
I didn't grow up with horrible parents. They did everything they could for me. I feel like they did a lot of right things, but they were not uh, coaches on how to convey emotions. Um, they were able to express it to each other, but when I was coming up, they weren't really able to show me how. And it wasn't until I was in college and I met my girlfriend's father in Seattle, and I saw how he ran his household. And I'm not going to say he was better or anything like that, but he had all girls, and he was the only man in his house. So he had to emote. There was no way around it. And he wasn't a big guy. He wasn't a real macho masculine guy. But when you sat down and had a conversation with him, there was no question that he was going to be able to have the full conversation with you, regardless of no matter how the conversation went. If y'all were talking sports, if y'all were talking ministry and religion, emotion, relationship issues, financial issues, it didn't matter how the conversation went. I mean, I heard this man have a conversation with his daughter as he was grounding her for coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and just hearing that conversation, the emotions in that conversation went all over the place. And I was like, I had never heard a conversation like that before. I had never heard a man talk to a young woman in that manner. And it was because of him that I actually started my journey of trying to. I didn't know that I needed to be a more effective communicator until I heard how he ran his family.
Did you apologize for keeping her out till 3 a.m.?
No. No. It was her sister. We were home. It was her sister.
Her sister.
Okay.
I never dated two sisters before.
Hey.
Neither have I. Neither have I. All right, guys. So this is not a topic we can cover at all in one episode. Really just wanted to get the conversation started, get some definitions, kind of feel where the dads were on this. And I think we're all in agreement that trying to make someone continue bad behavior or else they're not a man or not considered a man is a bad thing. But we're gonna have some more talks about this later. Talked about it in ourselves. We're gonna talk about it in our kids, in significant others, and things we can do moving forward to squash it. But those are gonna be in future episodes. So now it is time for last call. Anybody got something?
Yeah, I do. I do. So, I've known all of y'all, at least 25 years. I've known Antoy the longest. I've known Antoy for 32 years. And I just want to let each one of y'all know that I love y'all. And if y'all can't tell me that you love me back, then you're exhibiting toxic behavior.
Look here, man. We can talk after the camera's off.
So can each one of you express that you love me back, or are you going to
let me text you
toxic
real quick.
behavior and not be able to
Hey,
tap into your emotions and express how you feel?
Hey man, I like you a lot.
Say, man, this only the fourth date, man.
No, what I really have to say is similar to what Antoy said. Try not to express, not to exhibit or teach bad or negative behavior, not necessarily toxic, but bad or negative behavior to any gender in general.
I got a quote for my last call. What you do with your life and how you do it is not only a reflection on you, but on your family and all of those institutions that have helped to make you who you are. Hammering Hank Aaron.
Good one.
R.I.P., sir.
Mm-hmm. I have a quote too. It's kind of a rap lyric.
I knew it.
I got a lot of them. So don't argue with fools. People from a distance can't tell who is who.
Hmm.
Jay-Z.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Um, I went last time, so I'm not gonna go last this time. Um, this past Thursday, I watched my cousins. I participated in my cousins burying their mother. She was my aunt Barbara. She was the last of two of my dad's sisters. And my last call is about um, missed opportunities because on the street that we live on, there are on the major thoroughfare that's by my house. There are one, two, three, four, five houses of family members, all within 20 minutes of each other. And with me working a lot, I would always be really, really busy and I would make excuses saying, hey, I got work to do. I got work to do. I can't see y'all. This aunt was one of the few people that would call me on a regular basis and be like, hey, I didn't want nothing. I just wanted to hear your voice. Because, a lot of y'all may know I resemble my father a lot. He passed in 2014 and she misses her brother. So she was trying to connect to him through me, and I was always too busy, always too busy. And her death was kind of sudden, and it's just a reminder to me what I want to say to you guys. Don't put family off. You never know the day or the hour, and that is something that I need to be a better example of, because if I tell some clients, hey, I can't do it today, they'll be there tomorrow. I can I need to be better at spending time with some family members.
All right. So I guess I'll close this out then. I don't know if y'all have heard, but there was a doctor here in Houston who allegedly stole some vials of Moderna vaccine and used them to vaccinate some of his family members. But what's behind the story was that when they take these vaccines out of cold storage, they have to be used within a certain period of time, otherwise they go to waste. And um, these allegedly these vials were going to go to waste, and so he made a call and used them to vaccinate some of his family members. And so now uh, charges have been brought up against him. And I don't know. This is just I'm just a witness to what's being put out there about the story. But I will say this: if indeed those vaccines would have gone in the trash can, then I think that is um, um, a travesty on the process, or the lack of having a good process to get those vaccines in the arms of Americans. Those vaccines were paid for by the American government to go and vaccinate the American public, and so therefore whenever one of those vaccines goes unutilized and in the trash can and not in to the arm of an American citizen, um, for which they were paid for, it is waste, and it is slowing down the process of us getting from underneath this pandemic. And so he did not, in my understanding, he did not make money off of this. And he used vials that otherwise would have gone unused. And I think that what's more important than um, uh, following kind of the rules around categories of who should be first in line is to make sure that none of those vials go unused, regardless of whether the person who receives that vaccination fits into any of the groups that are out there, like first responders, people over 65, people under 9 conditions. Because when people do not show up for their appointment, I think those rules should be set aside, and it's first, next man up, first arm available, because the important thing is to get it distributed. And I know there's people out there that may not believe in vaccines, but there's also people who do. And so that's the people that I'm speaking to. And so if that is the case, and that truly is the case, with the decision that this doctor made, I do not think that he should be punished for it, because he did serve the true intent, which is for that vaccine that was paid for by the American government to go into an American's arm. And to close it out, Tom Brady is the GOAT, but Patrick Mahomes in a couple of weeks is about to slay the king.
He is. Let's go Chiefs.
You guys.
This is what I get for not finishing that game before we started shooting this.
Oh,
fight.
dang, my bad.
I hate you.
Well, actually, there's Chips bad. I didn't say it. So.
Man,
We're not surprised.